Hello, I'm retired Battalion Chief Larry Cockman from the Greensboro, North Carolina Fire Department History Book Committee. We're here today at the Greensboro Historical Museum. I'm standing in front of the General Green, the first steam pumper, or as they called it back then, a steamer. Today, December 9th, 2019, we are starting a new tradition of recording and preserving the heritage and culture of our retirees. Our retirees have contributed so much to the success of our great fire department. Their stories retire with them and are sometimes gone forever when they pass away. They will share their emergency calls that will always be a part of their memories forever. So sit back and listen as they carry us through their journey in the Greensboro Fire Department.
My name is Bobby Lee Wooten. I was in the Navy for 4 years, and when I got out I was looking for a job, so the only thing was available was P. Lorillard, so I worked out there for 2 years. And they was building a station on Elm Street, Station 11, and my brother-in-law lived out there, and he said, they're building a station, you might get on the fire department. I said, So I go up and talk to them, and they said, yeah, we're looking for some people, and I talked to Chief Boucher. He was the assistant chief. Moonwhack was the chief. And I come back a few times, and they asked me more questions and checked me off on the list, I guess. So I came to work. Well, for one thing, I was breathing a lot of dust where I was working. And I didn't like that too good, so I was really looking for a career. And after I thought it over, I said, I would love to do that. And I did, and I loved it the whole time I was here. Only thing I know for sure is fill out an application, and then every time you come in and talk to mostly maybe Faye or one of the chiefs, they'd pull out that application and they'd make a mark on it that you come in and talk to them. And I come in several times because I was interested and I wanted the job, and it's paid about the same as I was making at P. Lorillard, but some of the people in my class had already been hired and they was working at stations, but they came to work. Bill Long was one of those that was working when he came. And I'm not sure about Larry. I don't know if he was working, Larry, Raymond Cotman, your brother, and Graham Fuquay, Porter Carruthers, Alton Smith. Well, I really liked Jay Lewis. He was in the class too. And he liked everybody, and everybody liked him. So, yeah, we was, they was big putting in the pit out there where you suck the water out of for drafting. And our training officer, R.L. Powell, was down in the pit with somebody. While he was in there, we decided to have a water battle. So we was wetting the ones on the ground. We was up in the tower, and he come out and caught us. So he said, okay, everybody up the top, turn the hoses on them. He soaked us. So we didn't do that anymore. But Chief R.L. Powell was a real safety guy. He didn't want us to do anything to get hurt. Nobody got hurt. However, some of the guys, like Porter Carruthers, had been in the paratroopers. He slid the rope upside down. We went to the on break. We went on break down to get a drink or something. Come back and he's coming out the window, from the top floor, head first, and stuff like that. Yeah, every day, a few of the guys like Graham Fuquay and Raymond Cotman would be arguing about Chevrolets and Fords, and we'd also line up and play a little football. And Raymond could throw a ball at least, man, I don't know how far he went. I thought, my goodness, the guy was running hard as he could run. He threw it right to him. 3 or 4 times. It wasn't just an accident. He was a good football player and a quarterback. I did. And also, one of the things that impressed me the most was every one of the firefighters that I knew was just great people. They was good people. And I didn't know anybody that I didn't like. No, I didn't. I never met anybody really that I liked some better than others, and some than I did the others. But I was really impressed with the fire department, and I told my wife, I said, it's the nicest bunch of guys I've ever run into. Of course, I'd been at Pete Lord, and I'd been in the Navy, and I'd been in high school and that kind of stuff, but they hired good people. I was working out Station 9, and we had a ladder truck, so there was two captains in the room. One of them sleeping, and one of them wasn't. And Roy Marks could start snoring within 1 second of hitting the cup. And I've tried everything. I tried earplugs, listened to the radio. Finally, I took my mattress and went in the TV room and threw it on the floor and slept in there. But yeah, he could keep you awake. And eventually, they transferred him somewhere else. And I had a temporary station assignment because they was building Station 11 wasn't quite ready. So they brought a bunch of us to Central Station, and I went on Engine 2 with Ed Fullington. And I was there till they finished Station 11, then they had a big transfer list came out. And I went to Station 3 on Vine Street. It's now Yanceyville Road, but it was Vine Street at the time. And they really threw me in the briar patch because that's where I was born and raised. I knew where every street went in there. I didn't know the names of all of them. But I'd been up and down all of those streets and lived in that area, and out in Bessemer where we answered to, and Edgeville, and all those places. I knew where they were, and I knew most of the streets. Within a month, I knew every street in the territory. So some unfortunate things came up. They needed some drivers, and I'd been on 2 years, and they said, you got the job. I really wasn't. I said, I really didn't want to be a driver because I just wanted to ride the back. But they asked me to do that, and I started driving when I was on about 2 years, and I drove for 10 years and took the captain's test a couple of times. First time they did away with the test, and the next time I really got into it and studying, and I passed that test. Vic Stockard was the driver, and he'd been driving a long time, and he got killed in an accident on his farm later. And he really helped me a lot. And Fred Lawrence was on that same company, and Fred said, you can use anything I got if you forgot something except my toothbrush. He said, don't get my toothbrush. But that's the kind of guys they were, and they helped me all, tell me how to do it, and made fun of me occasionally when I tried to back that big deuce in, and the door was only about 6 inches on each side. I backed up about 5 times and come over and opened the door and said, are you trying to get in sideways or this way? Well, if you worked around Fuquay, you always had a nickname. But I had a little bald spot, which I still have, and he called me Rabbi. And because I had a place for a skull cap on top of the yarmulke. Well, I worked with J.W. Manus, and he was one of the smartest guys I ever worked with. I learned a lot from him. He was the captain, I was the driver, and I had a little Volkswagen Bug, and if he wanted anything, he'd usually just go over to the store and get this, go get that. So one day we were working, and they'd been out the day before with a friend of his, Mr. Wyrick, and he was about 80 years old, which I thought was an old guy, but now not too old. But he sent me over to pick up Mr. Wyrick, and I said, well, where does he live? And he said, over on the other side of the ballpark. I said, there's a whole row of houses, mill houses. And I said, there's a whole row of houses over there. Which ones do he live in? And he said, got long steps going up the front. Just go there and you'll see him. I said, I'm not going unless you tell me an eighth, go on and get him. He'll be looking for you. So I go over, and there's a guy out in the yard, but he's not looking at me. And I rolled the window down, and I said, Manus sent me to get you to eat fish with us. He said, if it don't rain, I'm going fishing tomorrow. He didn't know what I'm talking about. I opened the door and I said, Manus wanted you to come eat fish with us. He got in the car and I took him back to the station. And when I come in, Manus was in the kitchen, which is sort of where we come in the building. And he walked right by Mr. Wyrick and didn't say a word, and caught me by the shirt and said, who is that guy? He knew who it was, but I didn't, and he knew that. And he'd done people like that forever. There's one more that really stands out, and I tell a lot of people, but we had a nice fellow that lived out in back. He was Mr. Smith, retired from the mill. And we played pranks on him every day. He'd come out there every day, maybe 2 or 3 times a day. And he liked to come out there and talk to us. Besides electrifying his chair once or twice, we'd freeze his hat. And because he wore an old felt hat, and he'd be out there mowing the yard, and he'd come over and he'd be all sweaty, and we'd put his hat in the freezer. When he got ready to go, it'd be froze solid as a rock. But what I was going to tell you the most, the maintenance liked to train dogs at the fire station. And he'd get a dog, it wouldn't be nothing special, just a dog, not a breed. But he had some real pretty dogs, and he had a dog that he was training, and we threw him something from the table, and he caught it in his mouth, he got to eat it. Well, when we got through eating every day, Mr. Smith had come out, and we'd fix him a big platter of food that we had left, and he's sort of weak on his stomach if you said anything about food not being clean. He couldn't take it. So the dog had been sitting over there for about an hour while we was eating, and we was throwing him stuff on the table, and he was catching it. So he's staring at us. So when Mr. Smith comes in, he's sitting there by himself, and the dog just beat in on him like, I'm staring straight at you. And he asked Manus, he said, why is this dog staring at me? He said, you eating out of his plate. And he was ready for the bathroom.
Oh, man.
There was a union, and I took part in the first of it. We really wasn't very powerful because our chief wouldn't listen to us, and City Hall wouldn't listen to it. And we couldn't get any foothold in anywhere. But Joe Berry from Berry Oil Company stood up for us, and he went and talked to City Hall, and then they talked to us. And it was no problem. We worked out everything. A lot of people, signed resignations. They were going to quit. And they could have turned them all in. I signed one, and man, there's a bunch of people signed them. But Joe Berry stood up for us, and I really appreciated that to this day. And I've told him a lot of times. He's passed away now, but his grandson's running the business, and I talked to him just a couple weeks ago. Well, you live with 4 guys mostly, 3 or 4, but it's 4 assigned, and you get to know them real well. They just like family. And when I first went to work, it was just firefighting. We didn't do any medicals, hardly any medical calls at all. And we chipped in $1 a day to eat, and we had good meals off of that. Back then, $1 was $1, but now that's to buy a popsicle with that. But we chipped in $1 a day, and they'd figure out some meals for lunch and for night, and we had plenty. And we ate together all the time, and we really wasn't allowed to take the truck anywhere to get food like they do now, but that's changed during the time. But I learned to cook there, and basically what we would do is I would cook about 2 or 3 things, and everybody would cook 2 or 3 things. You sort of alternated those 2 or 3 things that you cooked. Like if I was good at spaghetti and making cornbread, they'd let me do that. And then if somebody else, we had a cook a couple of times cooked every meal, and he was really good at it. But they had a rule at Central Station. We had about 20 guys eating, and they had a rule saying if you complained about the food, you had to wash dishes by yourself. So that cut down on the complaining. One guy said, "This is the worst beans I've ever tasted." Oh, but it's the way I like them. I like them like this. We rode Engine 2 from Central Station out behind the Summit Shopping Center. We had a small kitchen fire, put it out right quick, and then the most terrifying thing when we got through was Vic Stockard was acting captain. He told me to drive back. I never drove a truck, and so I learned how to drive starting that day. Okay, the first call I ever drove was I had been made driver already, and I really didn't even know how to start the truck because we had a guy I worked with I'm the second driver and you ain't driving this truck. So I never got to drive it, not even drive it back.
Wow.
And when I got in the first call, I'm starter at, where'd the keys? No keys, they had to start it. But anyway, I got there and I was a little bit, excited. And we had a house rolling. And it was way out on, off of Church Street. There was like a house lined with cardboard and that thing ran off like. And we laid a line in. Captain Grogan was my captain, and we got it put out, but it was exciting for me. We just answered fire calls for several years, and I was working in the meal section where we mostly fought fires with cone meals, and they'd get started putting it out, and then if they got away from them, they'd call us. And sometimes we'd have a little excitement because under the mill where the fires were was some holes down there where the water drained into, and we knew where the holes were, but some of the chiefs didn't. And so we was under Revolution Mill, and Chief Sprinkle, which was a super nice guy, stepped off in one of them holes up to his neck. And the water was about knee deep, but that hole was really deep, and we forgot to tell him. One of the biggest fires I was on was Guilford College, and it was a dormitory, and it was in the attic. Somebody had poured some accelerant out and lit it, and it was rolling. We looked up in a small opening, and it looked like a furnace the fire was rolling around. But when I first got there, we caught a hydrant and went in. Some of their hydrants didn't have water, didn't have about 2 pounds pressure. And some of the really old lines, and we didn't use those, so we laid one from the street. And someone in maintenance out there showed me how to get to the attic, because it was a long hall and one door went to the attic, but the rest of them went into the rooms. He showed me, and to this day I don't know who he was, but we opened the door and went up, and I had Hal O'Neill and Raymond Holloman. And the driver, of course, stayed outside. That was Wayne Sandridge. And we dropped off Hal O'Neill, which is sort of a new guy, rookie maybe, at the hydrant. But by the time we got with the hose, he was already in there with me. And the three of us took the line up. We just took a small 1.5-inch line up a side of the building in a window and put it right on the fire, and we almost put it out. We did put it out, but they had big beams in there, like 6x6s. It was an old building, and they used heavy timbers. And those timbers burned to scorch them, but the fire went out. We had our own truck 3 answering with us, and I can't remember who was on there, right? Anyway, I asked them to see if they could ventilate the attic, and they did. And we pushed that fire right out of there, and hardly any water damage, hardly any fire damage. They cleaned it up, kept the building going. And after that, I did get 2 letters of accommodation from the chief, and one from Chief Kent and one from Chief Honeycutt. But I felt bad about it because those 2 young guys I had wouldn't put the fire out. Well, as a captain, I really liked J.W. Manus because he was really smart, and you could pull nothing past him. He knew what to do and everything. And Chief Honeycutt was really a good friend of mine. And well, our company started building inspections. We had never done that before, and they just chose our company, one shift to start it. And I thought, man, I hate building inspections, but I had some guys that worked with me, Fuquay and Jimmy Williams, really smart guy. He did all the paperwork. He did everything for me, and we did a good job on it. And I was surprised because I didn't think, especially me, building inspection. But working with Jimmy and Fuquay, and they was really helpful. We had a fire in O. Henry Oaks while I was working at Station 3 as the driver, and it was my sister's house, and her son got burned to death. And it bothers me to this day. He lived for about a week after that, and he was those houses, they was just living there while they were building their house. And those houses had hot water heaters in the utility room with gas, heated with gas. And they had the lawnmower stored in there. And this little fellow he was into something all the time, but he decided to fill up the tank. And the gas can was sitting there. He filled it up and it run over in the floor up under the hot water heater. And him and his little brother both was in there. And it was terrifying for me. I was really proud and thankful when I made captain, because I had no idea I was going to. I studied hard. I studied mostly for Fireman 2. And studying for Fireman 2, all the questions on the captain's test was in that, mostly, So J.W. Manus gave me a little book to read on how to do an interview, and I read that in about an hour or two. It wasn't really a big book. But after I read that and went on the interview, all the questions they asked me wasn't worded the same, but they was the same question. And so it was like guy was complaining about his job. He hated it, and I hate this place. And so you need to, find out what's wrong. So the problem was his sister was going blind, and he was worried about her, and he wasn't making enough money. So they asked me that same question. It wasn't somebody going blind, but same principle. And I read it out of the book, and it was the right answer. You get nervous for about maybe 2 days, and you can feel your chest, tight. And I don't know what it was. We didn't have anybody to talk to us or tell us anything, but we had some calls that nobody got killed, but I still got excited. We had a fire one time out on Cone Boulevard where a gas pumping station caught on fire. It was really roaring like a jet engine, and we was first in, and we couldn't put it out. That thing was shooting up in the air for like 80 feet, but we thought maybe it might explode at any minute. We was sitting only about 15 feet away. One of the firemen, a new guy, actually ran, and they eventually fired him for that. But we were scared, and my chest hurt me for about 2 days after that, because I was really, I was the driver, and I could stay behind the truck mostly. But we had Captain Summers was the captain, and he wasn't afraid. He went right on up there, but was going to try to put it. It was burning like a jet engine sticking straight up in the air, and it was making a terrible noise. Every chief on the fire department came out there to see, and most of the ladder trucks from Central Station parked all the way down at Summit Avenue. They didn't want to come up there. I don't blame them, but that bothered me for about 2 or 3 days. But we had some deaths in mostly smoke inhalation. But like I told you before, most of my firefighting was in Cone Mills, in them or under them. And we had one guy that I remember that he burned to death in his kitchen. And all he had to do was just open the door, and he'd have been out, but he laid down in the kitchen floor. And he was somebody I knew also. I was working the night Jesse Gray got backed over, and it really, really upset me for a long time. And knowing how Fred Lawrence was the driver, it really, I don't know how he ever got over it. I don't think he did, but it wasn't his fault. It just wasn't his fault. They told him to back up, and he did. No, I was at the station, but I was listening to it on the radio. As best I can remember, they stopped. Somebody had set a house on fire intentionally. It was an old, empty house. So Engine 2 pulled up near where they was going at the hydrant. And then of course, the captain is talking on the phone, on the radio, and he said they got some more instructions. Come on down to another street, and there's a hydrant there. So Jesse thought they was catching a hydrant, so he pulled the hose off and was preparing to catch a hydrant when they backed up, and he was just in the hose, and it backed over him. And we could hear, I think Captain Brown was the captain.
Was that Paul Brown?
Paul Brown. He was a real easygoing guy, and it upset him and the driver. You could tell they was all to pieces, and we were too. No, I drove for 11 years, and I never hit anything or had an accident, but you always thought about it. But the only thing I ever did was sort of stupid. Was I was on a call, and I was trying to catch up with my crew, and I jumped over this little wall, and I went down about 6 feet and landed on my knees because it was a place they backed under the building. That was over there at across from Station 6. I forgot what it was. A pretty bad fire, but anyway, young enough that I could take the blow. Tore my pants and Cricket's pants. So I enjoyed it. I met a lot of people that was really nice guys, and I still see them today, a lot of them. And it was just, I enjoyed it, yeah. Yeah, some of the big changes was we was working every other day, and 24 on, 24 off. Of course, most everybody had a part-time job so they could keep their bills paid. We didn't make very much money. And I got a job eventually with Sears, and I worked for them for 30 years. But during that time I was working one day and out here and over there, I'd wake up at the fire station. I said, where am I at? I'm at the fire station. I'm going to Sears. If I wake up at home, I knew I was going to the fire station. It gets on you a little bit when you're working that much, and we was working like 96 hours a week, and they cut that back.
Wow.
My health was really good when I retired. I retired when I was, 57. I had my 30 years in, so I retired, and I enjoyed that, and I was really healthy. Since then, in 2000, I had a heart attack and did open heart surgery. And that's about 19, 20 years ago. I still feel pretty good, but I don't have much energy. One person that probably made a big difference in my life was J.W. Manus, because he really knew a lot about everything, read all the time, and helped you out with a lot of. When we did stuff played games to wash the dishes, we played games that they'd ask you questions on the fire department. Well, we'd after we ate, sometimes there'd be more than 4, but 4 or 5 people. And when we was at Station 5, they had a lot more people, and Manus would put questions on the board, and you had to answer them. And who got the best score got off from washing dishes. Maybe the second one, and the third one, and the fourth.
Fire-related questions.
Fire department questions. And we did it every day. One of the most important things in my life was I joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints when I was at Station 3, and I've tried to live those principles ever since.
We hope you enjoyed watching these documentaries. It was our goal to share and preserve the memories of our retired Greensboro firefighters. It is our desire that these documentaries will inspire future generations to continue the brotherhood, sisterhood, and camaraderie while always striving for excellence in their careers. While fire apparatus, equipment, and technology have improved, several things will always remain the same. The courage and bravery it takes to mitigate natural and man-made disasters will always be a part of the job. Although our retirees are no longer a physical part of the GFD world, a giant piece of each retiree's memories have been shared with you today. These memories will be in their hearts and minds forever. A special thank you goes out to Captain Harold Haney for his many long hours of recording and editing. Thank you, Harold. A job well done.